look forward to talking to you about Turnaround, about Augsburg Fortress, the Ministry of Publishing of the ELCA. And it is a ministry, but make no bones about it, it's also a business. Because while we're a Ministry of Publishing of the ELCA, we receive no funding from the churchwide organization. Instead, everything we do, the investments we make, come out of the sale of the resources we create. So we live in this tension all the time of being both a ministry and a business. And I know there are many other ministries that are in that place. We've all seen charts that look like this in our denominations and across Christendom of the numbers going in the wrong direction in terms of membership, in terms of engagement, in terms of Sunday school attendance, in terms of small group attendance, in terms of giving, and so forth and so on. These are grim facts that we all face in our ministries. Some of the central challenges that we all face are that religious observance is shrinking across North America. We know that Protestant congregations, Lutheran congregations, are in persistent decline, and we have aging populations. In the ELCA, the average membership is, the average age is about mid-50s, mid to late 50s. In the population of the United States as a whole, it's mid to late 30s. That's an enormous gap from a sociological perspective. And I think that the LCMS and WELL's demographics would be similar. Organized religion, sadly, does not play the role that it once did, the role that it did when I was growing up. And besides all of that, we sometimes have resistance in our places of ministry to the concept of change, whether that's a ministry of publishing or an outdoor ministry or a congregation or a synod or a district. We have resistance to the change. I was so delighted with what Paul was talking about. I wished that I had had your slides ahead of time because I could have just used them as the framework and given Augsburg Fortress examples for each of them, because what he has talked about in his experience is virtually identical to some of the things that we've tripped our way through. And believe me, it has not been a linear progression. In addition, as Paul mentioned, to dealing with those situations in the church, we're in publishing. So in a very short span of time, we've gone from Gutenberg to Google. And yet, I'm very proud of my colleagues at Augsburg Fortress because, in fact, Augsburg Fortress as a ministry and a business is more stable today than it has been in decades. And we're creating dynamic, innovative resources for the church. So I'm really, really proud of my colleagues and all of their work. So what's our path been like? Well, one thing that we've done is we've tried to listen, to test, to learn from people inside our organization and people outside of our organization. We've done lots of prototyping, and we've really focused on thinking about human-centered design in terms of the creation of resources. When I came to Augsburg Fortress, I was living in South Florida, and I was running a computer and technology career school. And I thought I'd be there forever. I was an entrepreneur, I had a beautiful home, I was actively involved at Advent Lutheran Church, I had this business, things were going well. But God has a sense of humor, as we know. And so I was called to this role to lead Augsburg Fortress in Minneapolis, just in time for winter. So as I was relocating from Florida to Minnesota, our HR executive said, "Gee, Beth, in this interview process, you've been talking about how we should listen to our partners in ministry across the country. So instead of flying from Florida to Minnesota, why don't you drive and do listening posts along the way?" Well, I thought it was a brilliant idea. Wish I'd thought of it. After 19 days on the road, I was pretty weary, and then I wasn't so sure. But in fact, those listening posts 12 years ago 19 days on the road, stopping in congregations and synod offices and seminaries and colleges and universities and coffee shops and all kinds of places, has informed much of what we've done as the Ministry of Publishing of the ELCA because of what people were so gracious about sharing. Sometimes I think if we just stop long enough and ask people what their needs are and really deeply listen, they'll tell us. So that was the first 19 days 12 years ago. Since then, I've lived on Delta Airlines, and I spent a lot of time on the road continuing to listen and continuing to hear the changing, rapidly changing needs of people serving God's people across the church. Another thing that I did early on was I met with each of the individual staff people at Augsburg Fortress. One-on-one interviews, some of them were 10 minutes, some of them were an hour, and asked what their needs were and what they saw that we could change, that we could fix to make this a more dynamic ministry of publishing. And that has paid dividends through the years in terms of that level of connectedness with those folks. We continue to do lots of focus groups and listening posts, and I often use this slide and I say, you know, 3M really should pay me for this because I put up Post-it notes wherever I go, because I think that using a tool like this can be so helpful for inviting people to share what they're thinking, and not only the extroverts who are ready to jump into any conversation, but by providing a more passive way of getting information, we invite the introverts to share with us too. We do lots of testing of resources as they are in development. We go out into congregations and do ethnographic studies where we go into the 5th grade Sunday school class on Sunday and we just observe. We observe how are the children being taught, how are the teachers using materials, do they have the scissors that they need and the markers that they need, what's on the walls, what does the space look like? Because what we find is that what people report that they do and what they need in terms of faith formation resources or worship resources, in fact, doesn't always match up with what is really happening on the ground. So that kind of detailed ethnographic study and research has helped us change the culture at Augsburg Fortress, but also helped us in terms of creating resources that have true utility in the various ministry settings. We no longer talk about strategic planning at Augsburg Fortress. I remember when I was at Times Mirror Corporation a long time ago, we used to do strategic plans. They were things that we put together, we typed them up, we printed them off, put them in binders, and looked at them in 5 years to see if we'd actually done what we said we were going to do. In fact, we now need to live in a time of strategic thinking. And so we no longer even call them strategic plans because of the negative connotation of that. We use McKinsey's framework for a lot of our strategic thinking at Augsburg Fortress, and that means we ground ourselves in data. We are constantly looking at research, both research about the church, research about society, research about education, research about technology. We frame what are the right questions that we need to be asking about our ministry and business for this time. And what is the future? What does the future look like for theological education for Fortress Press? What does the future look like for faith formation for children, youth, and adults for Spark House, our faith formation division? What does the future look like for worship and music for our Augsburg Fortress imprint? And then identifying different potential pathways to reach that future and to shape to a preferred future. And then to choose, to make choices about which of those pathways, which of those opportunities. We find that these questions, this framing from McKinsey is very, very helpful in terms of our ongoing, continuous strategic thinking. And last, how do we commit? What do we commit to? Because at some point, you can't keep just thinking about it. You have to say, we're putting a stake in the ground, we're investing in this, we're hiring people who can do that with these skills, and we go. And sometimes we get it right, and sometimes we don't. And it's okay. Because one of the things is we need to be willing to move, to shift, to change, and to say, we didn't get this right, we didn't make the right decision or the right choice. How can we pivot and undo it or redo it in order to continue moving forward? Second thing in our path is communicating a clear vision for the future of the Ministry of Publishing, both inside and outside the organization. When I arrived at Augsburg Fortress, one of the things that I brought to the table was the use of the balanced scorecard. Like John Cotter's work on change, this comes out of the Harvard Business School. I commend it to you if you are not familiar with balanced scorecard. There are many other frameworks, but I find the simplicity and elegance of this works, or at least it has worked for us. Basically, each calendar year, and we're on a calendar fiscal year, we set up very precise goals around each of these 4 metrics. Learning and growth for staff, internal processes, customer metrics, and then financial metrics or perspectives. And we have very precise goals for each of these categories. Just setting up this framework when I first arrived was kind of new news and gave us a common direction, because Augsburg Fortress has always had wonderfully talented, hardworking people who were spending long hours working on creating great resources. The challenge was they weren't always working in the same direction, and by providing a common language and a framework, we were able to communicate across the lines of the various departments and divisions. We also created a new vision statement, and I think it could fit on a t-shirt, and that is, together we create resources that renew Christian life and community. And our tagline is Augsburg Fortress, creative, Christian. And that's not being creative with our following of Jesus Christ. That's being creative in terms of how we innovate, in terms of teaching resources and learning resources that capture the imagination of those who are in various settings for learning. We also listen deeply through the use of technology and through social media. A number of us individually and organizationally are very active on Facebook and Twitter and Pinterest and YouTube, and we set up listening posts and communities on these social media settings. It's where we can learn what is the newest thing that people are wanting in terms of their resources, and we can share with them what we're doing. We can do informal questionnaires and polls to find out what the concerns are. And so we have found social media to be mostly a wonderful gift. Sometimes not so much, but mostly. Implementing a grow, hold, fold strategy. I teach a lot on strategic thinking, strategic planning across the church, and this is the thing I always say: if you're going to only remember one thing I say, remember this. And that is that as we in the Ministry of Publishing have really had to focus our efforts. We used to be in the baptismal font design business. We were in the clergy shirt business, in the candles business, in the Sunday school curricula, music, textbooks, trade books, children's books, all kinds of things. We have had to refine our Ministry of Publishing, serving 2 communities: congregations and the academy, higher education. And we've really narrowed down our focus so that we could do fewer things and do them well. We call that the grow, hold, fold strategy. Figuring out, and I think this is as pertinent for a congregation or a district or synod or a seminary as it is for a Ministry of Publishing, figuring out what are the opportunities for growth and what are we going to invest our human capital and our dollars in for the future. What are we going to continue to do at about the same level that we've been doing it? And here's the hard part. What are we going to stop doing? What are we going to stop doing? So if you remember only one thing, remember grow, hold, and fold, especially fold. Identify and retain the very best talent you can and nurture their growth. This has been a hallmark of our work over the last dozen years. We're back to the scorecard because we spend a lot of time on that bottom component thinking about professional development for each and every one of our staff people. We have used the Strengths Finders work for a number of years now with all of our staff. It is a book that you can buy at your favorite bookstore, physical or online, and it'll have a code in the back, and they take a survey, and it identifies the individual's top 5 strengths, and then also talks about the shadow side of those strengths. Many of our staff people who have gone through this post their 5 strengths on the outside of their office or their cubicle wall, because it becomes, again, a common language and a way of getting the right people at the table for a discussion and planning and project work. We've also sent folks to the Austin Center for Design in Austin, Texas, to learn about human-centered design, which we've applied deeply into particularly our Spark House resource development, and the Savannah College of Art and Design. So we're investing in small ways and in big ways, and each staff person has 1 or 2 professional development goals that they are charged with attaining each and every year. So we're constantly investing in our colleagues so that they continue to grow, because that helps us grow as a Ministry of Publishing. That also includes creative partners outside of our organization. Those are writers and they're artists and they're composers and folks from all across the church who gift us with their many talents as they contribute to the work we do. 5th is drive out complexity. Augsburg Fortress was a big, complex, kind of clunky, old-fashioned organization. And we've had to make hard decisions that have had joyful outcomes in terms of streamlining our processes. One of the most recent things we did was just earlier this year when we made the very challenging decision of closing our own warehouse in Grove City, Ohio, and outsourcing distribution to a fine Christian organization, Professional Book Distributors, based in Atlanta, but the warehouse we use is in Bolingbrook, Illinois, outside of Chicago. We made that decision because our lease was up, and as we looked to the future, we said, gee, we have 70,000 square feet now. We probably need 30,000 square feet because of the changes in our business and all the digital delivery of content that we are going to. We have to sign a lease for 7 years. What will we need in 7 years? I don't know. I can't see that far out. We also know that in order to provide the great delivery services that are needed and demanded, frankly, from our church customers, we had to invest in technology for fulfillment, warehousing, distribution. And yet, that wasn't our core competency. It is Professional Book Distributors' core competency. It's what they do, it's who they are. And so we made the difficult decision to close that warehouse, treat those good long-term employees with as much grace and support as possible, but go with an organization that this is what they do, and they do really well. I had the joy of being there at the Bolingbrook, Illinois facility just last week, and to meet the 20 staff people who are serving Augsburg Fortress and our partners in ministry. And it's very clear to me, well, it was a hard decision, it was the right decision. It allows us to focus on what we do really well. Provide creative space and the best tools you can afford. And for us, this means technology. We want people to be innovative, to create marvelous new digital resources. We've gone in the last probably 4 years from having about 3 people on our video team to having 19 people on our video team because of the great demand for animation and video content for teaching Sunday school and confirmation and adult Bible studies and so forth. In fact, we moved this past weekend. It's been a busy week. Actually, I wasn't there. I was in Chicago at the ELCA Conference of Bishops, so my marvelous staff moved us. We moved catty corner across the street in downtown Minneapolis, and we now have this beautiful, beautiful space that has first-rate technology, and we think that you can just feel the energy in it already. And we've pulled our 3 divisions into one place so that Augsburg Fortress and Fortress Press on the 8th floor, Spark House, our innovative faith formation team, is on the 7th floor with a great open staircase between them. And there's just a sense of being in this new space and being energized by the space. It doesn't necessarily take a lot of money to do some of the things we've done. We've put whiteboard paint in almost all of the conference rooms so that as we're together, you can get that sense of energetic collaboration and creative spirit. So on Tuesday of this week, we had a fabulous blessing service, and I thought you might enjoy seeing some of the photos of our new space. If your travels bring you to the west, to Minneapolis, let us know. We'd love to show you around. So that's been our path. It looks pretty linear as I put it together in slides. It hasn't been. Lots of fits and starts, lots of hard decisions. But as I said at the beginning, I'm very, very proud of my colleagues because, in fact, this ministry of publishing, in a time when lots of people thought we wouldn't be here, is now a vibrant place producing resources that receive kudos from all across the church. If we can be helpful to any of you in any way, don't hesitate to ask. And I, too, will be happy to share the slides for the Siebert Foundation website. Thank you very much.